ex-prisoner's amazing act, how he rescued a kidnapped child and transformed his life in 24 hours. Jake trudged through the dewy grass of the park, the whispers of passerby cutting through the crisp morning air. That's him, the ex-con. The words were hushed, yet sharp enough to slice through the fabric of his being. Each accusation dug deeper into the hollow space where hope should have been, reminding him of the young lives he had ruined, particularly that of his daughter, Emily. The 5 years in prison had been more than a punishment. They had been a relentless reminder of the father he had lost. As he stepped closer to the playground, Jake felt the tightness in his chest constrict painfully. It was there, engulfed by the faded colors of childhood laughter, that he felt the weight of his past squashing him down. Unemployed and untrusted, he watched families interact from a distance, longing for a connection, yet paralyzed by the stigma of his history. Maybe I should just go back, a whisper echoed in his mind. Back to the safety of isolation, where the judgment could not pierce through. But he pushed the thought aside. He couldn't. Not anymore. Before he could sit on a bench, a woman's frantic voice sliced across the air. "Oliver, where are you?" The desperation in her tone hit him like a brick. Instinctively, he turned toward the sound. The memory of his own daughter crying his name in frustration haunted him. He risked everything to save Emily, but failing her was a mistake that still weighed heavily. Hormones had raced in his youthful mind, his need for validation blinding him to the consequences. He watched the mother, her eyes wild with fear, and something in him stirred. There was a different weight than what pressed down on him daily, a yearning to redeem himself. Despite his own struggles, he felt the urge to step forward, to fight against the looming shadows of judgment. He hesitated, weighing his own demons against the cries of a mother desperately seeking her child. How many times had he felt powerless? This was his moment to seize, to prove he could be more than his criminal record. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. As Jake rushed into action, he noticed a van parked in the shadows of a nearby tree, the engine humming ominously. His gut twisted. A wrongness radiated from it as the figure of a man emerged. He surveyed the playground like a predator, stooping into the dirt without a care, the gravel crunching under his feet.
Jake's heart raced, not with fear, but a deep-seated urge to protect. He was no longer just an ex-con. He was a father who had failed once, but wouldn't let another child suffer. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jake took a step toward the man, his limbs shaking with all he had bottled up. The growing crowd around him began to murmur, eyes flicking from the mother to the dark figure of Jake, and then to the stranger, each addition deepening his anxiety. "What are you doing?" he called out, the words stronger than he felt. The eyes of the townspeople fell on him. Would they see him as a hero today, or just an ex-pawn trying to play martyr? The thought clung to him, more suffocating than the stares that burned his skin. The confrontation spiraled as the man turned sharply, his expression unreadable. What would Jake do? He realized the answer might just redeem him or ruin him entirely. The voices around him grew louder, pregnant with judgment. In that moment, Jake understood. Today was not just about rescuing a child. It was about reclaiming his identity and facing the demons that had haunted him for 5 years. Would he let fear dictate his actions, or step into the unknown and fight? As he took another step, every heartbeat rang in his ears. Would his fight for redemption be enough to earn back not just respect, but perhaps a connection with Emily? Would today mark the turning point or seal his fate forever? Every breath felt like a countdown as he prepared for yet another moment that could change everything. The moment expanded into a tense silence, the park alive with anticipation. Jake locked eyes with the stranger, adrenaline coursing through him. He felt it igniting the remnants of courage he had thought lost forever. The man, now fully aware of Jake's presence, took a defensive stance. There was a predatory gleam in his eye, a willingness to fight that threatened to derail Jake's intentions. As spectral whispers of guilt clawed at Jake's resolve, he steadied himself, honing in on the mother's hurt. each breath, each heartbeat synchronized with the weight of his choices. He had once cowered in silence, cloaked in anger and shame. This time he would not let fear paralyze him. He had tasted powerlessness. Now he craved agency, not just for himself, but for those who needed protection. "Hey, get away from that kid," Jake shouted. It was a command wrapped in desperation, laced with an authority he didn't completely feel. The words cut through the tension, a beacon of defiance. The stranger hesitated, his attention flickering between Jake's outburst and the child's mother frantically scanning the park. In that brief second of uncertainty, Jake seized his opportunity. He charged forward, feeling the weight of all he had lost and the possibility of regaining some of that in this decisive moment. "Stay right there," he barked as he closed the distance. The crowd by now stirred, uncertainty turning into muted murmurs.
They were waiting, judging, hoping. But Jake pushed through the cacophony in his mind, fueled by a primal instinct to protect. Just as he reached the man, another voice rang out, a young boy's frightened cry for help. "Mommy!" The sound sliced through the air, reverberating in Jake's core. It anchored him further in his resolve. The van hadn't just served as camouflage, it was a potential dark portal to more suffering, something he could not allow. "Let him go!" Jake lunged, swinging a fist at the man, who barely sidestepped. The act had fueled a rush of adrenaline, but also stripped Jake of any form of strategic thinking. As the two men grappled, the primal fight consumed him, yet he remained acutely aware of the mother's cries, one deep within his heart. If he lost, if he failed, what would that say about him? Jake could feel the weight of his old identity beginning to dissolve in the heat of the moment. This was no longer about being an ex-con. It was about unveiling the man he had buried deep within himself, a father who would do anything to protect. Rough hands slipped away from his grasp as the man turned, the boy's cries amplifying with the urgency of a ticking clock. Jake drove forward, focusing on the singular task at hand, not letting another child slip through his fingers as he had once let Emily down. As the confrontation escalated, fear began to clash with determination inside him, every instinct urging Jake forward, through the anger and the doubt. But just then, the stranger, sensing defeat, pushed him aside and made his way toward the frightened child. The distraction knocked Jake off balance, and for a moment he stumbled. The world around him blurred, time suspended, and in the chaos an overwhelming realization dawned. He was fighting not just for a child, but for his redemption, for the chance to reshape the narrative of his life. With quickened thoughts and fueled by flashes of regret and determination, Jake caught a glimpse of the man stretching toward the child. Without thinking, he lunged again, pouring every ounce of resilience into one final move. This was it. There would be no second chance. Would this impulsive act of bravery serve to rewrite his life story, or would it dig him deeper into the trenches of failure? He understood in that fleeting moment, the battle was not just for Oliver's safety, it was for his very soul. As Jake propelled himself forward, a voice inside echoed louder than anything else, a silent prayer wrapped in hope. Today can be my day. But with uncertainty clawing at his resolve, the outcome teetered on the edge of a knife. Just then, he caught a glimpse of the mother looking on, her eyes wide, filled with a mix of fear and hope. He could not fail now. All he needed was to focus, to push beyond his boundaries, and to act decisively. In that heartbeat, everything would either change or shatter.
As the weight of his past collided with the promise of a new future, could he seize this chance to reclaim his identity? Could he emerge from the shadows of his past into the light of redemption? The air crackled with electric tension as a decision loomed on the horizon. Jake launched himself at the stranger with fierce urgency, the primal instinct to protect driving him with an intensity he never knew he possessed. In that moment, the world became a blur, defined only by the fading cries of the child and the relentless pulse of his heart. Time seemed to stretch, the seconds thick with anticipation and dread. As Jake's shoulder collided with the man, they both tumbled to the ground, wrestling for control. The scent of grass and sweat mingled with the metallic tang of fear. Every instinct screamed at him to fight, to prove that he was no longer the man who had hidden in the shadows. He locked his arms around the stranger, trying to leverage his weight to pin him down, but the man bucked like a bristling animal, grappling for freedom. Jake channeled the pent-up frustration of years lost. Each blow exchanged reminded him of nights spent behind bars, caged within his own mistakes. No longer would he let fear dictate his actions. He needed this, not just for the boy, but for the fractured pieces of his own soul. In the chaos, memories flickered to life. His daughter's laughter, the taste of freedom on the day he was released.
and the hash of disappointment when he faced his new reality without her. The struggle intensified. With sheer force of will, he managed to get his knee on the stranger's chest, using his weight advantage. "You overstepped, and now it's over," Jake grunted, confidence blooming in his voice, urging him on. But fear prickled his thoughts. What if he couldn't hold this position? What if he failed again? He glanced over his shoulder, heart sinking at the sight of the horrified mother, anticipation etched into every line on her face. The child's safety hung in the balance, making the stakes painfully clear. Waving hands surrounded him, some shouting, while others recorded the unfolding chaos on their phones. The crowd's energy swirled around him, amplifying his need to redirect their doubt into something solid, something powerful. "Get your hands off him!" The command came from the mother, and the strength in her voice ignited something in Jake, a fierce determination intertwined with the desperation that lay heavy in the air. The man beneath him was starting to squirm, and Jake felt a rush of panic, but steadied himself, remembering who he was fighting for. Grappling with all his might, Jake focused on the stranger's face. He saw the aggression morph into anxiety, and suddenly it clicked. The man was as scant as he was. They were two sides of the same coin, both desperate, both flawed, and yet one was the predator, while the other was the unlikely protector. Jake pushed harder. "This is your last chance. Let him go."
"He!" shouted, making his voice ring with authority, pouring every ounce of his being into it. He needed to be more than just himself. He had to embody every second he'd spent contemplating redemption, every hour of loneliness that had carved him into this moment of truth. With a final, determined heave, he forced his opponent's arms down, pinning them against the ground. The gasping breaths of the other man beneath him filled the spaces of doubt inside Jake, urging him toward closure, not just for the boy, but for the man who had once given in to darkness. And just as the stranger's panicked eyes connected with his, something shifted. A realization danced through Jake's mind. He was not merely fighting an enemy. He was fighting the remnants of his past. He could turn this moment into something transformative, something that would redefine his existence. "Let him go, and you walk away," Jake demanded, the rawness of vulnerability mixing with an ironclad grip of resolve. He felt the strength of the crowd swelling around him, no longer judging, but joining him in this fight. As the Parker air filled with a sudden quiet, the world seemed to hold its breath in rapt anticipation. The air crackled with possibilities. Could this be the turning point he desperately sought? A chance to rewrite his narrative, to be branded not only as a rescuer, but as a changed man? The tension hung heavy, an unspoken challenge waiting to unfold, leaving Jake dangling on the precipice of change. Could he truly emerge from this struggle as the man he wanted to be, or was this simply another chapter in his complicated journey? The moment hung in balance, fibrillating like electricity, ready to either spark a new beginning or fizzle into an unsalvageable end. Would the stranger yield, surrendering not only the child but also Jake's buried fears and instincts? Only time would tell. The stillness shattered as the stranger's eyes shifted, the residual panic flickering into something nebulous. Resignation? Jake felt a shift in the dynamic, like a weight being pulled off his chest, but uncertainty still gnawed at him. Was it true surrender, or just another mask of defiance? "Let him go," the stranger echoed, voice shaky, as if the words barely escaped the tightness in his throat. The inner turmoil writhed within Jake. He could see the fear now reflecting in the man beneath him. They were both trapped in a cycle driven by desperation, the pursuit of control stemming from profound vulnerabilities. Instinctively, Jake released one of his arms, opening a slender window of opportunity for the stranger to regain leverage. "I won't hurt you," he maintained, compelled by a naive hope that human connection might still prevail. But even as he said it, a voice within him warned that kindness might be a foreign concept to this man. "Just listen," Jake breathed, fostering patience that felt altogether alien. The world around them buzzed with anticipation, excitement and dread mingling in the air. He maintained the pressure on the man's chest, not merely a physical weight, but a manifestation of both their fears kept aloft. Time stretched and throbbed, echoing his racing heart. It was maddening how the perception of danger could transform him so drastically, forcing hidden corners of his character to emerge. The dark chapters of his past loomed larger than life, threatening to swallow him whole. Was he truly capable of breaking the cycle, a cycle he didn't even realize he was part of until now? "Yes, you can walk away," Jake's voice turned urgent, filled with a raw power that reverberated through both their realities. For the boy, for you. What if redemption didn't belong solely to him? The new realization sent a shiver through his spine. The stranger's eyes narrowed, tension rekindling the fight within him. But Jake held on to that flicker of vulnerability he had glimpsed earlier, the rallying warmth of hope. We're both caught in desperation. His breath was measured now, carefully orchestrated. You can choose to let him go. It's your move. As those words departed his lips, a thread of fear clawed at his gut. Would vulnerability ignite an explosion? Would showing this stranger empathy unravel him completely? Jake tightened his grip instinctively, torn between the two sides of a coin he had never wanted to be part of. The cries of the child escalated, threading through his resolve like a haunting melody, a reminder of innocence waiting to be shielded. Jake glanced fleetingly at the horrified mother, now captivated, breath held on the edge of hope. Could he really do this? Then it happened, that moment of undeniable clarity. He powered through the raging storm of his insecurities and self-doubt, tapping into a wellspring of untested courage. He wasn't just grappling with another man, he was engaging with that inexorable part of himself that had been dormant for too long. Each surge in adrenaline nurtured his determination, and each passing second melted away the shadow of his past decisions. Your fear doesn't have to dictate your actions, he challenged, the intensity of his voice sharpening. We can both choose better. The man's brows furrowed, battling an unseen war as he wrestled with Jake's words. In those fleeting moments, the reality of their struggle shifted. It wasn't the meeting of two adversaries, but an intersection of humanity, flawed but capable of redemption. But in that new light, a deafening siren wailed in the distance, an urgency that gripped the air tighter. An awareness flickered across Jake's mind. Time was running out. They had to resolve it soon, and what would that resolution mean for both of them? The growing static formed an electrifying tension, prompting Jake to question everything he had laid bare in front of the crowd. Could he emerge as more than just a bystander to his own life?
Could he seize the moment, or would this slip through his fingers like sand? As he honed in on the stranger's conflicted expression, everything intensified. The stakes, the choices, the lives involved. The world spun around him, his heartbeat drumming in synchronization with anticipation. All that remained was one piercing question. Were they both ready to face the consequences of their unyielding fears? Or would this moment dissolve into another regret? The crucible of transformation lingered before him, simmering with raw potential, an uncharted map, filled with promises of both success and failure. Would he embrace the unknown, or retreat into the shadows that had once comforted him? A decision hung heavy in the air, thickening the atmosphere with a mix of dread and exhilaration, waiting for the final push to break free. The moment hung in the air, suspended between fear and resolve, the potential for change crackling like electricity. Jake's thoughts raced as he studied the stranger's face, a map of confusion and desperation etched deep within. Each fleeting second brought him closer to an epiphany. He had stepped into a decisive point, one where not only futures were at stake, but also the unraveling of his own narrative. "Look at me," Jake urged, leaning closer, his voice steady amidst the chaos. Within him, distances from the past began to collapse. He'd spent years shying away from confrontation, letting the weight of his decisions knock him down, complacent in disbelief. This was the moment he'd rehearsed in his mind countless times, where he stood firm, clawing back pieces of his identity he'd forfeited in darker times. "You're a father, aren't you?" The words tumbled out, uprooting a parallel that laid bare their shared humanity. "You have to protect that boy." He gestured subtly toward the frightened child, whose eyes were wide, shimmering pools reflecting both their fears. It was a fragile connection, but it sparked a flicker in the other man's expression, igniting what seemed a long-dormant sense of responsibility. In that tiny gleam of recognition, a shudder rushed through Jake. It wasn't just about freeing the child, it was about liberating this man from the shackles of despair. Their thrumming shared reality broke through the tensions surrounding them, the sirens outside fading into the background. "You can put an end to this," Jake pressed, his breath cooling. "The fear you feel, letting it consume you won't protect anyone. Let him go. You don't have to live in this moment of chaos." With each word, he felt the parental instincts wrap around his heart like a steel chain,
reminding him of his own ghosts and failures. Jake noticed the stranger's gaze flicker momentarily to the child. It was subtle, but a whirlwind of emotions surged in those quiet seconds. Regret, fear, perhaps even a sliver of hope.
It struck Jake like a revelation. The only way to combat darkness was through light, through forging connections that challenged despair. This was not only a call to action for the stranger, but a duel against his own ghosts. Imagine what life could look like, Jake continued, now leaning forward even more. You could walk away, for that boy, for yourself. You have the chance to choose a better path. A quiet longing bubbled within him, the desire to break the cycle, not just for this man, but for himself. Jake had long thought redemption belonged to others, but now it settled upon him like a mantle. But then a flash of doubt washed over him as he held his breath, adrenaline coursing. Would vulnerabilities mask what was truly at stake? Was he foolhardy to think kindness might be a lifeline in this desperate chaos? Yet a startling realization dawned as he drew from that deep well of vulnerability, acknowledging who he once was without fear. The stranger's grip on the child faltered, wavering under the weight of Jake's gaze. It was in that hesitation, a moment when both their pasts coiled tightly together, that Jake felt the surge of possibility. What if his unfolding bravery could break this cycle right now? Time stretched, minutes slipping like grains of sand through an hourglass, and the siren swelled again. Jake's heart raced, not from fear, but from the clarity that surged within. There was power in this confrontation, a chance to ignite change. "Choose love," Jake whispered, barely audible but potent, the certainty in his voice underscoring the turmoil between them. "Take back the light." The raw silence that followed felt monumental, fraught with potential. All Jake could do was hold his breath, caught in the clasp of shared existence, their fates colliding in the stillness. Would that choice, balancing on the precipice of surrender, bring revelation or calamity? Jake could feel the weight of every heartbeat around him, the air heavy with anticipation. He braced himself for whatever may come, for he was no longer simply a bystander. He might either find redemption or be swallowed by the choices they both had yet to make. But what he didn't foresee was the horrifying cry that erupted from nearby, a voice stark in the clarity of the moment, one that would shake the foundations of everything he thought he understood about himself. What madness awaited in the moments to unravel? The piercing scream rippled through the air like a splintering glass, shattering the fragile silence Jake had woven. It seemed to echo from the depths of an abyss he had only begun to climb out of, a sound so akin to his own past that it gripped him fiercely. The sudden intrusion forced his focus back to the present, grounding him once again in the urgency of the situation. "Stay back," the stranger barked, the momentary flicker of uncertainty extinguished beneath a surge of protective instinct.
Jake's pulse quickened, and he recognized that this was not just a confrontation of wills. It was a desperate struggle for control, a reassertion of power that threatened to derail everything. An invisible boundary had been drawn between what could be salvaged and what may quickly spiral into irrevocable chaos. Jake's instincts kicked in. He became acutely aware of his surroundings, the fractured glass on the floor, the soft breathing of the child still trapped within the stranger's tight grasp. Everything amplified his sense of responsibility. He had stepped into this moment with the intention of being a catalyst for change, yet he now faced the reality that even the best intentions could be veiled in danger. "Listen to me," Jake spoke softly again, this time choosing each word with care as he gauged the stranger's posture. The other man's breath was heavy and ragged, the weight of the world evident in the creases that lined his forehead. "You don't want this. You don't want to hurt anyone." For the stranger, this could either be a moment of clarity or a descent into panic. Jake's mind raced. He needed to navigate this precarious path more deliberately. He focused on maintaining his calm, unsure whether to extend empathy or assert authority. Then came the child's whimpers, an emotional note that sliced through the tension. Jake felt his own heart pulse against the confines of his chest. It resonated with a shared desperation. As a parent, his instincts screamed to intervene, to protect. Yet how could he balance that drive against the need to resolve this conflict without violence? "Remember what I said about choosing love?" Jake urged, linking his gaze with the stranger's. "You have a chance to choose a different path. Think of your son. What would he want you to do?" The unexpected shift in dialogue, the shared humanity, the invocation of kinship,
seemed to awaken something within the stranger, a glimmer of doubt flaring across his features like a wildfire. Jake held on to that flicker, hoping against hope that recognition would awaken the paternal side of this man that had been buried beneath layers of hopelessness and fear. "You can break this cycle," was what his heart screamed. Yet Jake knew he could not force the man into a choice. It had to come from him. Each breath felt like a fragile thread that could snap at any moment, but each heartbeat reminded Jake he had agency here, not just over his fate, but perhaps over the fate of others. He could be the tiny spark that ignited a transformation, a movement toward light, but it wouldn't be easy. The essential question still loomed over him. Would he galvanize a change, or would the weight of past failures pull him down once more? Just then, the stranger's grip shifted again, heart-wrenching indecision cascading across his face. Time elongated in Jake's mind, every second thick with tension. Would their fates intertwine in salvation, or ensnare them in despair?
As Jake prepared for the next words that would hopefully guide them both toward liberation, the sound of sirens crescendoed in the distance, a fitting background score for this emotional standoff. But it was a different sound that broke through the loud chaos, a deep, guttural sob from the stranger, revealing the cracks in his facade. In that moment, Jake realized they were teetering at the edge of an uncharted precipice, where fear threatened to consume them even as hope flickered through the maelstrom. What would it take for the man to fully surrender, to embrace the tumultuous journey towards recovery and renewal? The next few breaths would be pivotal, where courage could be born anew from the ashes of despair. But the question remained, would they take that leap together? The answer hung in the balance, tantalizingly close, yet infinitely distant, as the world around them spiraled into chaos. Jake felt the tension in the room shift as the stranger's sobs pierced the chaos, his body swaying slightly, as if the weight of the world had suddenly become too much to bear. This was an opening, a chance to steer them both away from the brink. He took a step closer, mindful of each movement, his voice steady yet soothing. "You're not alone in this. I understand the pain. We all have scars," Jake said, drawing on the shared humanity that had momentarily flickered in the stranger's eyes. He wasn't merely trying to disarm the man, he was anchoring himself as well. The connection wasn't just professional, it was deeply personal. He had faced his demons, clawed through the shadows of his past, and emerged with a newfound resolve. Perhaps this man could too. Minutes or seconds, it no longer mattered. Each heartbeat felt monumental as Jake attempted to peel back the layers of despair that enshrouded the stranger. "Look at that child," he urged, nodding subtly toward the small figure who had watched wide-eyed from his cocoon of fear. "He just wants to be safe. You can give him that." The air was thick with tension as the stranger's resolve began to crack under the weight of his choices. The realization washed over Jake that he was not only negotiating for the child's safety, but also for the stranger's salvation. He felt a connection to him, a bond that transcended their current predicament. It wasn't just about the child in peril, but also about embracing a journey towards healing. The stranger's wild eyes softened for a moment, a glimpse of the man he might have been, a father, a protector. Jake seized upon that flicker, feeling his own determination grow. "You have the power to change this, to be better than you were yesterday." He hadn't planned on this path when he stepped into the danger, but somewhere along the way, it had become more than a mere rescue mission. It was about transformation, both for the boy and the man who held him captive. But Jake sensed a hesitation, the doubt that clung to the stranger like a shroud.
Time stretched, grating against the urgency of the moment. Jake, drawing on the resilience he had developed in his own life's trials, decided to tap into something deeper. "I was once where you are, lost, trapped by decisions that chained me to my past." His voice gained strength as he shared a shard of his own history, something he had hidden away for too long. "But I made a choice. I chose to fight for a life worth living." He could see the conflicting emotions rage within the stranger, and every detail, the trembling hands, the teetering balance between love and desperation, cut deep. Jake felt more than just a witness. He felt the familiar pang of his past rise within him, an echo that urged him to take that last step forward. As the sirens wailed ever closer, urgency pressed upon him. His heart drummed in his chest as he reached out, palms open, revealing vulnerability. "I know you want to protect him. Then choose this moment to change, for both your sakes."
A deep, guttural growl erupted from the stranger, a blend of rage and despair. Jake's mind surged with adrenaline, his body readying itself for whatever might come next. They stood at a precipice, and everything hinged on that crucial moment of choice. What if the stranger lashed out in fear, desperate to cling to control? Or what if he grasped the offered lifeline, understanding the voyage towards redemption? The world narrowed to that singular moment, the child, the stranger, and a man poised between possibility and despair. Would they ascend as allies in healing, or would the spiraling descent claim them as casualties of their pasts? In that charged silence, Jake waited, prepared for either outcome that could drastically alter the course of their lives. The air crackled with uncertainty, but one truth anchored him. True bravery often lies in the act of confronting one's deepest fears. The moment stood suspended in time, the raw energy pulsing through Jake, adrenaline mingling with desperation. He could see the conflicting storms within the stranger, a mirrored image of his past self, the ache of regret, the thrill of fear, the gnawing pull towards redemption that danced just beyond reach. Every instinct told him to be ready for violence, but he pushed aside his instincts, opening his heart to empathy. "Please," Jake urged, his voice softer now, yet laden with intensity. "This isn't the end. It can be a new beginning." The stranger's breath hitched, and Jake could see a flicker of struggle behind those wild eyes. The tension in the room tightened like a coiled spring, the air thick with misery and potential. There was no escaping the reality of what they faced, but Jake sensed a shift, a willingness to break free from the paralysis of despair. Beneath the chaos, he found clarity. His own history had armed him with tools to navigate this treacherous landscape.
He remembered the moment of choice that had altered his trajectory, when he had stood on the edge, ready to plunge into darkness, and then had turned towards the light, however uncertain it felt. Could he inspire this stranger to do the same? "You can redefine your story," Jake continued, stepping even closer, bridging the invisible chasm, a lifeline thrown into turbulent waters. "Your past doesn't have to define your future. What if letting go is the greatest gift you can give that child?" The man's grip on the weapon tightened, the internal conflict playing out vividly in the flickering shadows of his face. Jake's heart raced, knowing the stakes, yet within him stirred a profound sense of purpose. He was no longer just an observer. He was part of this pivotal moment, capable of igniting change in both their lives. Suddenly, the stranger's voice broke through the tension, raw and fragmented. I don't know how." Jake's pulse quickened as he seized the opportunity. "You just have to start, one step forward. Trust that even the smallest movement can ignite change." The sirens wailed in the distance, a reminder that time was fleeting, yet he focused solely on the man before him. "Look to your son. What does he see? Fear, or a father who can choose differently?" Each syllable was a calculated step into the stranger's psyche, a bridge built from understanding rather than judgment. The man's wild eyes brimmed with uncertainty, a tremor coursing through his limbs. Jake felt a surge of empathy rise within him, a reminder that he had once felt that same fear, the suffocating darkness of self-doubt. He remembered the anguish of not knowing if he could escape the choices that chained him. "If I can change, you can too," Jake pressed, his own fragility bleeding into strength. "Look at him. Take that leap. Show him the man you want to be, not the one you're afraid of becoming." For a split second, the stranger's defenses waned, revealing the flicker of hope clinging behind the masks of anger and despair. Then the moment shattered, as an agonizing roar split the air, and the stranger recoiled, the weight of the world threatening to crash down on him once again. Jake took a step back, instinctively sensing the shift in dynamics, a spiral of tension racing back into the room. He realized that he had come too far to back down now. "Whatever you're holding on to, it's not worth this," he urged, his voice almost pleading. With the sirens growing closer, he felt the time slipping past, urgency compelling him to act decisively. The conversation had opened doors that had long been shut. What if it wasn't just about saving the child anymore, but salvaging their own lives? As Jake lowered his arms, widening the space of vulnerability between them, he wondered, would the stranger be able to breach the wall of his own despair? Would he see the light Jake was fighting to share? The answer lingered tantalizingly close, waiting to be unearthed.
The question loomed large. Was this the moment they would seize control of their destinies, or let fear reign once more? Jake braced himself, aware that the next seconds could either solidify their transformation or seal their fates forever. Jake's breath caught as he watched the stranger teeter on the precipice of decision. The chaos around them faded into a distant hum. Nothing existed except the two of them and the choices that lay before them. He felt the weight of every shared moment of pain, every moment he had fought his own demons creeping into the atmosphere between them. It was both suffocating and liberating, and he sensed that they stood at the tipping point of something profound. "What if I mess it up?" the stranger murmured, swallowing hard. The weapon shook slightly in his grip, its meaning, once a symbol of despair and destruction, beginning to morph into something else, something uncertain yet hopeful. "That's the point," Jake replied, his voice steady yet imbued with warmth. "Messing up means you're trying. You're human, and so am I. Look at me. I've stumbled plenty, but we learn from it." The stranger's brow furrowed, and despite the dark cloud of indecision draping over him, a hint of curiosity sparked in his eyes. This unfamiliar exchange gave Jake the glimmer of confidence he needed. He realized he wasn't just appealing to the man's logic, he was reaching into the fractured pieces of his soul and igniting an ember of possibility. "Your son is watching," Jake continued, knowing the gravity of those words. "What kind of father do you want him to remember? The one who hid in shadows, or the one who stood bravely in the light?" The metaphorical walls around the stranger felt like they were crumbling, just as Jake had once learned to tear down his own. This wasn't merely about saving a child, it was about reclaiming a life. Hope fluttered in Jake's chest, filling the void where anxiety used to churn. "Change doesn't happen instantly," Jake added, mirroring the steadiness he wished for the stranger. "It's the small steps that build momentum. Choose to let the pain guide you, not drown you. What you're feeling is real. Acknowledge it, harness it, channel it into action." In an instant, the stranger's expression shifted from fear to contemplation. The weapon hung like a pendulum, swaying back and forth as the battle within raged on. Jake observed closely, ready to adapt his approach if needed. "Imagine what it would feel like instead of being weighed down," he offered, his voice almost a whisper now. "Imagine walking home, not as a man burdened by regret, but as someone who has chosen to stand up, to show love where fear once reigned." For a moment, it appeared the stranger was cracking, the tension in his body beginning to melt away, replaced by an unfamiliar sensation: hope. But Jake knew that hesitation could still sink them. Time was pressing, drawing near with every wail of the sirens. "Don't let this moment slip away. Take it."
"Channel that energy towards your son," Jake urged, journeying deeper into the stranger's psyche one last time. "Believe that you can write a different narrative. Become the man your child believes you can be." Then the moment stretched. An eternity hung in the air. Frankly unsure of the outcome, Jake steadied himself, resisting his innate urge to overreach. He sensed they were close, too close to back away now. As the loud chaos of approaching law enforcement began to echo through the surroundings, the stranger seemed to hesitate once more. Would he ultimately allow fear to drive him, or would he seize this fleeting moment to forge a new path? Just then, the stranger's shoulders slumped slightly, the gun wavering in his grasp as his breath quickened. Jake realized this could be the defining moment, a breaking point where vulnerability transformed into courage. An unexpected roar echoed from the distance, a stark reminder of how fragile this precious instant truly was. Would he choose light over darkness, to move forward from the shadows haunted by regrets? The burden of the decision loomed larger, and Jake steeled himself for whatever was about to unfold. And then it happened, a flicker of resolve igniting in the stranger's gaze, as if a dam had begun to break. Just as Jake prepared for the leap toward clarity, the outsider glanced hesitantly behind him, a flicker of panic in his movements that sent a jolt through Jake's gut. What had he seen? The answer was neither simple nor clear, and the shift in the stranger's demeanor left an unsettling sequel of questions hanging in the air,
awaiting resolution. In an unexpected twist, the moment of revelation shifted as Jake noticed a group of officers arriving at the edge of the park, their radios crackling and voices slicing through the tension like razor blades. The sight of law enforcement sent a tremor of panic through the stranger, who seemed torn between confronting the chaos of his reality and the plea Jake had just laid bare before him. "Let him go," Jake commanded again, his voice sharp and resolute, fueled by desperation and a newfound clarity about his own life. In that instant, he felt the weight of his past lift, replaced by the urgency of dismantling the cycle of despair that had gripped them both. The stranger, still caught in the grip of his internal struggle, hesitated. It was in that moment of stillness, when everything hung precariously in the balance, that Jake realized he had a decision to make, not just for himself, but to show this man what change truly looked like. "Today could be a turning point," Jake shouted, every word born from the depths of his own experience. "Letting go isn't weakness, it's strength. The real strength is in fighting for the ones we love, not hurting them out of fear." Jake took a step forward, his palms open, not as a threat, but as a bridge. He understood that fear had kept this stranger locked in a cage of past mistakes, just as it had for him.
The sight of the approaching officers brought a haunting clarity. Jake could see it in the stranger's eyes, the fight and the fear mingling in a blend of desperation. "You don't want to ruin your life any further. This isn't just about you, it's about your son. Show him you can be more." His voice rang through the park, each syllable echoing the promise of what could come next. Slowly, the stranger's grip began to loosen, wavering in uncertainty. Jake could feel a breakthrough ripple through, the walls of misunderstanding and regret beginning to crumble. "Let him go!" echoed with a powerful resonance. The flicker of recognition sparked on the stranger's face grew brighter, like dawn illuminating the darkest corners of the night. He had seen the light embedded in Jake's words. Yet, before a decision coalesced, the stranger's gaze darted toward the officers, fear of capture threatening to swallow him whole. "Look right here. Focus on your son," Jake urged, gesturing emphatically towards the small boy. "You can choose another way. Make a choice today to step into the light. That's what being a father truly means." The air thickened, every moment stretching on as if they stood at the crux of a universe teetering toward either despair or hope. Jake felt the surge of emotion rise, beckoning him to embrace this fervor that had been bottled for so long. In this chaotic dance of forces, he saw his reflection. The stranger's vulnerabilities mirrored his own tumultuous journey, from darkness into the faint glimmers of possibility. And then, like a dam breaking free, the moment came. Jake locked eyes with the stranger, their gazes connecting, two paths converging. The man finally released the weapon, a small but powerful act, allowing it to tumble to the grass with an almost reverential clatter. "Let him go, for you're about to reclaim your life," Jake commanded softly, the air filled with the charged anticipation of transformation. The stranger choked out a sob, the sound a mixture of relief and regret, and the diminutive figure in his grasp was released. The child stumbled forward, confusion fading into unconditional trust as he dashed toward his mother, who was sobbing tears of relief. As the minutes unfolded in the aftermath, officers surrounded them, moving to secure the scene and offer aid. Jake stood in that transient moment, spinning in wonder at how quickly life can pivot from darkness to light. He inhaled deeply, feeling an overwhelming sense of accomplishment wash over him. This was metamorphosis in real time. In that instant, Jake had proven to himself that though his past bore weight, it did not define him. He had emerged as a protector, an ally not just to another father, but to the son he had once failed. The officers approached, ready to detain the broken man, but Jake stepped forward. He needs help, not condemnation. He spoke with unshakable resolve, having traversed through murky waters to reach this clarity.
"He's a good man caught in a storm. Let's ensure he can choose a better path." The officers hesitated, absorbing the shift in the atmosphere. They reflected on the potential for redemption rather than punishment. Jake saw the recognition in their eyes. They understood the makeover unfolding before them, a man stepping away from the brink of despair. Jake turned, searching the park for the remnants of his once beaten-down spirit. He had reclaimed not just his dignity, but also a profound sense of purpose. The boy called out, "Daddy!" as he melted into his mother's arms, while his own daughter, too, waited in his heart to be reunited one day. In that sacred moment, Jake knew he had transformed. He was no longer defined by his mistakes or his past. He had risen to become more than an ex-convict. He had achieved a lifelong goal, to be a beacon of hope, a father worth remembering, and a living testament to the power of choice. And as the sun peeked through the clouds, illuminating their world, Jake understood that this was just the beginning. He had finally conquered his fears and proven to himself that he could rise, soaring on the wings of redemption into a new chapter of life. If you've been moved by Jake's incredible journey of transformation, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support for stories that inspire change. Leave a like now to help us reach more people with these emotional stories. Comment below your thoughts or theories about the ending. Let's spark some meaningful conversations. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how powerful personal growth can be. Your actions pave the way for even more incredible transformations ahead.